recording now. And we wanted to start by getting to know everybody a little bit. So clearly have a lot of folks in the room today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll, which is what inspired you to participate in today's workshop? Because we want to make sure that what we're presenting is relevant to what you're looking for. So if you can see on your screen, have you been seeing a higher level of distress during the pandemic? You want to learn how to talk with students in hard situations. Want to learn more about our particular program, so Pioneers for Hope, with Doris will be talking about, our confidential advocate, Sharon, counseling services, which I will be talking about. Maybe I want to meet other people who are working to support students, or someone recommended this workshop to me. And sometimes it's my manager told me I had to come, and that's a recommendation as well. So go ahead and put your answers into the poll. And then once everybody's had a chance to put their answers in, I'll go ahead and share that with everyone. So I'll just wait a few more moments. And if there are additional things that drew you to participate, feel free to put that into the chat. We would love to hear that as well. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show us our results. And so it looks like, people are all over the board, which is great because these are all the things we're going to talk about. But a lot of folks have been seeing a higher level of distress since the pandemic. A lot of folks want to learn to talk with students in hard situations, and then interested in all of our programs, especially the confidential advocate role, which is great. And then building community is a big one as well. So, sorry, did I share that? Let me go ahead and share that. I was just reading it to myself, but now you can see it, pardon me. So as you can see, we're all over the map on that one. And then I'm gonna stop this one and then give us one more poll that we can respond to. So I would love to know folks' role with students. So what is the way that you interact with students? So I put some very general resources up here. Are you a classroom instructor? Do you work more with student services as a counselor or coordinator of some kind? Are you more at a front desk being the gatekeeper of services? Or do you have more indirect student contact? So that could mean that you're behind the scenes. It could mean that you're a manager, and so managing folks who are running programs. But that will also help us understand where people are coming from in terms of what they're seeing with students. All right, so this time I will actually share our results. And again, all over the map, we have a number of folks that are working in some sort of student support services role, some classroom folks, some front desk staff, and a couple people that are indirect. Great, okay, so that just gives us a great idea of who is here with us. And yeah, in the chat, there are a couple people who are saying additional things about what they're looking for. And also if you want to put anything in there about your role with students, if that didn't quite cover it, the things that I put out. So suicide prevention resources for students, we will be talking about that. And there's also a separate workshop that we do just on suicide prevention. So we'll be sharing some information about that. Anything else that didn't come up in those polls that folks are interested in hearing about, or other roles that you play with students that might come into play as we're talking about these issues today? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Does that kind of cover it? Okay, fantastic. So feel free to use the chat throughout. Feel free to unmute yourself. I'll try and stop periodically and we'll be asking for questions. We would really love for this to be interactive, but I'm also aware we always have a lot of information that we're trying to present to people. So we're gonna keep it going, but if there's a question that pops up in the chat, we can always go back to that. And we wanna make sure that this is interactive and that we're getting to what you want. So please feel free to chime in if there are particular things that we're not hitting. But to start, before I start sharing our slides and our content, I wanted to ground us in just a little self-reflection about where we're each coming from as we think about working with our students. So think for a moment about the identities that you personally hold. So this might be your race and ethnicity, this might be your gender presentation, this might be your sexuality, your economic class, your level of education, your disability status. It might be the role in your family or your role at work. You might even want to jot down on a piece of paper just some of the identities that come up for you that feel particularly important, that you're really aware of carrying in the world. And just noticing the areas in which maybe you feel like you have more privilege and some of the areas you feel like maybe you have less privilege. So the reason I wanted to bring that into the space with us is just to acknowledge that the ways that these different identities intersect with one another say a lot about how we perceive the world and how we experience the world. And so, for example, Doris and Sharon and I all identify as women. And so that gives us some common experiences as we walk through the world and some common ways that people might react to us. But the experiences that Doris and Sharon have as Black women are really different than the experiences I have in the world as an Asian American woman. And so just holding that each of the identities that we carry and present to the world really change our unique experiences. And so acknowledging that and thinking about how does that affect how you're interacting with students, how you're understanding their experiences, the parts that you can resonate with easily and the parts that maybe are a little different than what you experience. And so just thinking about the ways we can sometimes assume that our experience is what everybody else is going through, and the ways that it's really helpful actually for us to be curious about that and to question, maybe other folks are having a different experience, and what do I need to ask or learn to understand that better without making those assumptions. So thinking, for example, about right now, somebody who's able to work from home, like many of us are, versus an essential worker who needs to be out there. How are we experiencing the pandemic differently? Or maybe a parent with school-age kids who's navigating remote learning at home versus somebody who does not have kids at this time navigating it. So just as we go through today's training, think about those layers of identity that you hold personally, and keep in mind how different identities of your students that might come to mind with scenarios as we're going through this training, how does that affect their experiences right now? And does that help you understand some of the questions that you see them asking, some of the ways they might be presenting to you, some of the things that they're expressing frustration about? Does that open up in your mind like, oh, okay, I kind of see this differently as I'm thinking about how was my experience different from theirs? How is my experience the same as theirs? So any questions about that? Any comments? We just wanted to kind of start grounding ourselves in that sort of awareness as we are such a diverse campus, right? And as we're thinking about how that affects how we interact with the students that we are talking with. So our agenda for today is to give a bunch of tips of what to do when you encounter a student who's in distress, and then to think about campus resources. And so each of our three presenters will present about our programs and what we offer to students. And then after each of those sections, we'll go through a scenario and break you into small groups so you can discuss what would you do in this situation, given what we've been talking about in the workshop about our resources and about the tips. So that's kind of what we will be doing. And I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. And so this again is our introduction. We already did our introductions, and so we'll go right into our tips. So the first tip is if you find yourself with a student in distress, and the kind of the definition of what is distress, can look really differently for different folks in different situations. In general, we define it as if a student is feeling distressed about something, they are in distress, right? We don't define it based on, do I think that this is an important situation, but what are they experiencing? And the first thing that we really want to ground ourselves in is having a trauma-informed perspective. So that means thinking not about punishment, like what does the student do wrong and how do I need to give them a consequence to teach them not to do that again. In a environment such as this one, in the pandemic, as we are just recognizing a lot of systemic injustices, we don't need to heap more punishment upon our students. Instead, we want to really think about a restorative perspective, which means how do I restore the student to their right functioning, to their right relationships, to their right success in the university? Is there something I can do that will invite students not to give up, to continue to persist, that will give them some resources so that they can recover from whatever might be happening and be able to move forward. And so the perspective we want to hold is not what's wrong with you, what did you do wrong that you might find yourself in a situation that's distressing you, but instead a perspective of what has happened to you that might not be your fault, that might just be a circumstance that you are vulnerable to for whatever reason, but what has happened to you that you find yourself in this situation. And then the next thing we want to do is create intentional connections. And this is always very important. Our university has always been extremely relational and really dependent on how do we take care of each other for students to succeed. But now more than ever, as we're connecting remotely, we are really lacking and hungry for connections, human connections. So making space to just check in at the beginning of any meetings, to just say, how are you doing? You know, we don't have to jump right into getting down to business. I just want to see what's going on, anything you want to tell me about. And then also noticing if we have an ongoing relationship with a student and we notice a change, like suddenly they're not as engaged, they're missing appointments with us, they're not showing up to classes, taking that extra step to follow up. Just noticing that students are really overwhelmed right now and they might not have it in them or be able to be organized enough to reach out and say, hey, I can't come to class today, or I'm not able to do this assignment. And so it really, really helps. And this is what students are telling us as we do surveys. It really helps for people to be taking the initiative to show that they're noticing if somebody is kind of falling off the radar, to show that they care, and to show that they are reaching out proactively and not just waiting for the student to have time for, you know, on top of all the other stuff that they are navigating, to also reach out and kind of organize and get on top of that kind of communication. So taking that extra step just in case something's wrong and just in case they need to be connected with somebody who cares or, you know, another resource on our campus. The next thing that we recommend is making support resources visible. And so this is something that you can do before you know that there are any problems, but just in your syllabus, in your office, you know, talk about them regularly, sending out links regularly to make sure that students know that there are a lot of support services available on campus. So this breaks down the stigma, because we're not saying there's something wrong with you and so you need this resource. We're just saying all of our students, here it is for you. You are paying for this. You are entitled to this. Please take advantage of these resources if you or someone else you know should need them. And so I love how Doris often talks about this. She's like, I'm sure you know somebody who needs food. And so I'm going to, you know, go ahead and tell you about our pop-up food pantries. And so just a very matter of fact, making sure that the resources are visible and available. And students often, you know, there's so much information coming at them all the time. They often need to hear about these resources multiple times before they'll remember and be able to take advantage of them or feel comfortable taking advantage of them. So don't feel like you're boring them by saying it over and over, but just keep, you know, putting it out there. A lot of people put links to things in their email, you know, signatures to just say, here's some campus resources. I just want you to always know that they're here. The next thing is to model what you hope to see. So really thinking about how is your own experience of this pandemic time and whatever you might be experiencing from it, how might that be useful to just share with students of like, yep, we're all making mistakes. We're all missing deadlines. We're all trying to be creative and figure out how to continue to live our lives under these circumstances. And so being transparent about that stress is affecting all of us, that mistakes are really normal right now, right? Not changing the focus and just, you know, sharing all your problems with them, but just making it really normal and accessible that, yeah, we're all going through a hard time. I understand that. And so I'm going to be somebody who's going to be supportive and thoughtful if you share with me some of the things that are happening for you. And then share ways that maybe you have been intentional or creative about your own self-care. So just making it really clear that this is important for all of us to be taking care of each other, to be, you know, making time to get outside, get some exercise, connect with people, whatever it is that you've been doing that has supported for you. Just talking about that really openly and being transparent about that as well. And then lastly, normalize reaching out for support. And so introducing these programs in a way that is just saying, I know a lot of students who have used this and it's been helpful. So let me share this information with you, for example. So not making them feel like they're the only ones. So I'll pause there. Any questions, comments about the things on this slide? And again, you're always welcome to unmute yourself or welcome to put anything in the chat. All right, so I'll continue to move forward, but if you're typing, feel free to put it in there and we'll jump back to it. Our next tips are so those were kind of the preventative tips or kind of the perspective that we encourage folks to hold as they go into any of these, just into your work. But these now are tips for what happens when I encounter a student who is in distress. So the first thing we say is to stay calm yourself. You're getting really upset and anxious and agitated is only going to raise their level of distress. So try and stay calm, take some breaths, pause, slow things down, and just acknowledge these situations can feel intense for you too. They can remind you of situations that you've been through, or none of us are working on this campus because we don't care about students, right? So hearing that they are struggling impacts us, right? It tugs at our hearts. So take a breath and remind yourself that you're staying calm in the midst of this situation is going to help them to stay calm as well. Try not to further escalate if there's any conflict. So sometimes a student who is experiencing distress is going to present in a certain way, right? That they are angry. And sometimes that anger comes out at you as the person who works for the university that I'm really frustrated with, or is not giving me the services that I feel like I need. So just acknowledge that is normal and don't take that personally, right? There are lots of reasons that students are feeling stressed and frustrated right now. So it's not all about you and you don't need to take that all on yourself. And try not to further escalate the conflict by getting into it with them, making it personal, or kind of engaging in that way. As much as possible, try and put your own feelings about whatever's going on aside so that you can focus on what's going on for the student and stay focused on supporting them. The next thing is to be clear about your limits. So really thinking about what is your professional role with this student? What are the services that you're in charge of, or the skills that you have that you're going to offer to them? And what is your personal boundary around how much you're going to take on? And that might be different. Different professors have a different sense of like how much relationship they want to have, how much personal sharing they elicit from their students. And that's all fine. We don't need to be cookie cutters in our roles. We can all have a different personal sense of what's our style and what are we comfortable with in our relationships with students. So think about what is your personal boundary in terms of what you're comfortable hearing about, what you're comfortable taking on, and maybe what you're not. And that might be based around your own experiences, what you've been trained in, or what you've been exposed to. And sometimes if we've been exposed to something, it feels like, well, that's actually a place I don't want to go with students. That is just too hard. There's too much personal stuff for me. And so for whatever reason, you need to set boundaries around that. Feel free. It might be personal, professional, your own experiences, your temperament, your stress level at this moment in time. There are some days where we just feel like, I can't take that on. And that's all okay. It's good to know that up front, as opposed to pushing ourselves to be present to something or to try and support a student when we just really don't have the capacity. And then what ends up happening is we start to get snippy, resentful, we can't follow through in the things that we're promising, and that becomes actually more harmful to the student. So if you need to set a boundary, don't judge yourself about that. We are not judging you about that, but it's really helpful to know that and communicate that up front, as opposed to setting students up for an expectation that you're not going to be able to fulfill for them. And then another thing is to communicate really clearly about your boundaries and your reporting obligations, right? So just to say, before somebody starts disclosing something to you that you would need to disclose to Title IX, saying, I'm so glad you're saying this. I'm so glad you're letting folks know that you've experienced something. And before you go any further, I want to remind you, I am a mandated reporter to Title IX. So in these kinds of situations, I would need to talk with the Title IX office. And so I just want you to know that before you go any further. You're welcome to tell me anything you need to tell me, and then we can talk together about how that process is going to go. Or if you're not sure if you want anything reported to the Title IX office, let me talk to you about other resources that are confidential. So that would be Sharon, our confidential advocate, or any of the counselors in the counseling center. Those are the only people on our campus that do not need to report to Title IX and can hold it confidentially. So just being upfront again about those boundaries and inviting students to be able to slow down and make a choice about what they disclose and to whom really empowers them to be thoughtful about what they're looking for and how they want to come at that. So let me pause there. And Sharon, I don't know if you want to say anything else at this point about reporting or how you would have that conversation with students.
Sure. I definitely appreciate the, remember your personal boundaries, and then also, notice your triggers, just noticing what happens for you when, a student comes to you and they disclose something immediately, checking in with yourself, checking in with your body. We've all been through a lot of different things. And so sometimes someone can present something to us and immediately there's a shift in our energy. There's, a tightness in our chest. There's a change in our breath. Just taking a moment, as Shauna said, to just slow down and just kind of notice what's coming up for you. And I think that's important, because then that may lead me to then remember after this conversation or after this interaction that, what, that came up for me. And maybe I also need to go take care of myself. Like that might be an area that, I may have to go and, seek a resource for myself. And so that would be the only thing that I would add to this particular part of the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sharon. Any questions about that? Because I know talking about reporting and how to have that conversation with students often brings up a lot of questions from staff and faculty. So anything folks want to ask or add? Yeah, Esther.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Esther. I am the new academic engagement coach for the Excel program, and it's going to be new for me working with students. So I am curious to know, is the converse like is it always going to be as clear as it seems like it is, with me needing to inform them like, oh hey, wait, before you say something I need to just know I'm a mandated reporter? Is it always going to present in such like a clear and direct way where I immediately just say this? Or because doesn't I know that's not how life works all the time, and I'm just curious.
Yes, you are absolutely correct, Esther. And if other folks in this meeting have experience of this, feel free to share it as well, because I think you're 100% right. We share these tips and then life happens and things don't really happen in this way. So that's one reason that for all of our staff and faculty, we encourage folks to make it clear on your syllabi, to make it clear in all communication, like before you, as you're starting a relationship with a student, to just let them know. And just a reminder that we have Title IX on our campus. That is so that our campus can investigate and respond to any sexual violence that we hear is happening, because we want to keep everybody safe. But I am mandated to report to them. So just so you know that up front, trying to put it out there as matter of factly, but as early as possible so that it's not a surprise. And then it is a little awkward, Esther, if somebody is kind of having a heart to heart and saying, there's something I need to tell you, to say, hold on, and so we want to do it in this balanced way that we don't always strike that balance perfectly. So I think trying to hold like, I am compassionate, I'm glad that you're telling me about a situation, and for, in order to make sure that you're making the choice that you want to make right now, I want to let you know that I'm a mandated reporter. And at the same time, sometimes people tell us things and we don't have time to do that. And that happens a lot. And so at that point, just saying, I'm so glad that you told me this. It sounds like that's a big thing, to share with somebody. And part of my job is that when I hear something like this, I need to pass it on to Title IX. Here's what that means. They're going to reach out to you and say, can I ask you more information about this? And you have the right to say no. And so just being really clear with how that process is going to work, and that they still are in charge of what they do from that point forward. But really thinking about, sometimes we can't put that genie back in the bottle. Another thing that we invite students to do sometimes is to speak in hypotheticals. And so to say, before you say anything more, here's my reporting. if you want to ask me, like, hypothetically, if this were happening to my sister and she were a student at East Bay, what would you need to do? We can have that conversation, and then you're not, you know, this is about her sister. I don't need to report anything. And so there's ways to kind of be creative and work around it. And I think if we're doing that in a way that we are always coming from a compassionate perspective and showing that we're here to support the student, not to shut them down, but just to make sure that they always know their options and they feel empowered to use their options and be in charge of that process. That's what we want to be doing. Does that make sense, Esther? Any other questions about this? It's a great question.
That makes so much sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking.
And
Yeah, you bet.
I just want to say thank you, Esther. We both are new to Excel, so we're just starting in our roles. And I'm glad she did bring that up, because for me, it's like, if you say you are a mandated reporter, my fear is then you shut the student down and they walk away, and it's like, then I'm freaking out. What do I do? You know, because now I'm concerned about them and they weren't able to tell their story. So I like how you gave us the hypothetical thing. That's going to be very helpful, you know. So, but yeah, I will thank you for the link, and I'll be looking at that to really get clear on, you know, what the role really encompasses. So thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Yvette. And I think, yeah, that it's really helpful to have options, right? We can speak in hypotheticals, or there's this amazing person named Sharon, and I met her at a meeting and she seemed great. And so if you want me to connect her to you, you know, I can do that. So just to let them know, again, they have options. They have other people they can talk to. And again, because our campus is so relational, saying, I know Sharon, she's great. It's going to put students so much at ease to say, like, okay, this isn't just like a nameless person that I'm going to send an email to, but this is a real person that's going to help me and take care of me. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So the last thing on this slide is something we've already touched on a little bit, but keeping a compassionate perspective is really important in these situations. So always just putting whatever you're hearing into the context of, okay, and pandemic and remote learning, you know, and structural injustices, you know, just remembering the overall environment that we're all living in right now, to take a breath and be gracious to the student and be gracious to yourself. If it's a situation that is really different from anything you've ever experienced, or if you hear about a student who's making choices that you, being you, would never in your life make, really think about putting yourself in their shoes. So at some level, whatever they're doing makes sense to them, right? And so try to find connection points with your own experience and assume that they are doing their best, just like you would do your best in a similar situation. So try not to judge it. Look for the ways that their choices are really making sense to them, so that you can be compassionate and understand what are the values that the student is holding, or what are the other stressors that the student is holding, to help you understand what the choices that they're making. It's also important not to minimize their experience, and not to say like, oh, you know, you'll get over it. It's just, you know, a boyfriend in your teens is not that important, you know. Not true, right? If they're in distress, it's going to feel really invalidating and really shut them down if you minimize what they're going through. So their distress is real to them, even if you wouldn't feel the same way in their position, even if you think they're going to feel differently tomorrow, being with the distress that they're feeling right now. You don't want to make them feel misunderstood or judged. And then the last thing is to assume positive intent. And so I know, especially for folks that work at like a front desk and feel like they're gatekeepers of services, it can feel really easy to assume that you're being manipulated by a student, or that they're just saying whatever they need to say or doing whatever they need to do to get access to the service that they need. But it doesn't help anyone to have that assumption and to kind of be critical of the interaction that you're having. And so assuming that the student is telling the truth until, you know, something comes to light that maybe they're not, assuming that they're doing their best, assuming that they are intending to use the services appropriately, and just coming from that kind of compassionate and helpful standpoint really helps us to build positive relationships with the students that we're encountering. And then our next slide just encompasses some very basic but very important skills. And so thinking about active listening skills, and these are things that I'm pretty sure everybody in this meeting does automatically without even thinking about it, but they are very foundational counseling skills that all of us use no matter how many years we've been in the field, we continue to fall back on when we're in tricky situations. So active listening means holding back on the urge to jump in and problem solve and just knowing these situations are complex or else the student would have figured out the solution already. And so really accept that you might not be able to solve the situation they're in within the conversation you're having with them, right? You might not be able to fix everything, but what is important is that they feel like you've listened to them, you've understood, and you provided them some support. So if they leave the conversation with you feeling less alone and a little more hopeful that people care about them and that there are support resources available, that is your goal. And that is really transformative. And so you can use basic techniques like the ones on this slide. For example, reflection, just kind of reflecting back what you're hearing from the student. So it sounds like, you know, you're saying you're really upset about this situation. It sounds like you're really frustrated. And that shows that we're listening, and it also gives the student a chance to correct us if we're hearing wrong. So they might say, I'm not frustrated, I'm just really disappointed. And you say, oh, okay, you're disappointed. Tell me more about that. And it helps you move forward in a more accurate way. Validating their experience. So saying things like, I've heard a lot of students, you know, are struggling in the same way. So you're not alone. It makes sense that you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And then asking open-ended questions that kind of open up the conversation and allow the student to invite the student to share a little more instead of closed-ended like yes or no questions that kind of shut down a conversation. So that just allows the student to decide if they want to tell you more about the situation or not. So I'll pause there. I know that, again, active listening is something that we hear about a lot. We maybe have been trained in. Any questions that come up for folks about these skills or this kind of stance? Great. So continuing to move forward, and this is where we talk about some of kind of the more intense things that you might hear. So the best practice in general, but especially when we're thinking about safety concerns, is to ask really directly about our concerns. And so our own discomfort with hard topics like abuse or suicide comes across to students as us being uncomfortable with those topics, and therefore they probably shouldn't share it with us because they don't want to freak us out or make us feel awkward, or it doesn't feel like we know what we're doing. So we want to be comfortable asking directly about these issues to show that we are people that students can disclose this stuff to, because we don't want them, like Yvette was saying, we don't want them to walk away thinking, I guess there's nobody who can help me, right? And so having direct conversations means that we really understand what the student is saying. When we're uncomfortable and we talk vaguely, you know, we can say things like, are you gonna hurt yourself? And the student's like, nope, I'm not going to hurt myself. But what does that really mean? Does that mean they're going to overdose on a bunch of pills and go to sleep and they don't think it's going to hurt? And so they say, no, I'm not going to hurt myself. We still don't really know what they're saying. And so it's much better to say things like, are you thinking of taking your life? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? Because then when the student answers, we know exactly what they're answering, and we can get a better sense of what is the risk level here and what are we talking about. So there are a couple of examples on this slide that are really concrete, and these are, you know, not things that you need to memorize and go out and start saying to students, but just examples of how you can use language like this in your own words to speak really directly. So saying, I'm concerned about this behavior, I'm concerned about this statement that you made in an email, or, you know, we're working remotely, so in an email or in an essay, or, you know, whatever it is. Being really concrete, so it's not your interpretation, but it's just, this is what I've seen. You're not coming to class, you know, you're missing all of our appointments, and that didn't used to be how it was for you. And so I'm concerned that there's something going on, and you might need more support. So trying to be really concrete and not interpreting, so they can't really deny what you're saying and argue back against it. And then language like, it sounds like you're going through a really hard time. So again, kind of reflecting and validating, it sounds like things are hard. And then has it gotten to the point where you've thought about ending your life? So asking that really direct question. And we encourage folks to role play and practice having these kinds of conversations before you're in the moment, because it can be so uncomfortable if you've never said those words before. To do it live for the first time is really hard. And so we do, one of our wellness ambassador trainings is called I Can Help, and that's particularly about suicide. And we do role plays and just kind of practice and talk about this language. And so if you'd like to join us for one of those trainings or watch the video we have of it online, that might be a helpful thing. And then the last thing is to be really genuine and purposeful as you're asking these direct questions. There can be a line between what am I asking just because I'm curious, and what am I asking because I'm actually going to do something with this information. So you know that if you're not working in the counseling center, if you're not the confidential advocate, you probably, the student is going to need to talk to somebody else about these issues. And so don't set them up to have to tell a hard story again and again, right? Ask the information that you need to know for your purpose of, do I need to connect you with this other service? And at that point, you don't need to probe anymore. We don't want to re-traumatize them by having them tell the story multiple times. So let me pause there. Any questions about this? Yeah, Andrea.
So thank you so much for giving us kind of the language to use. And for me, I haven't had to have a conversation about asking whether or not it's gotten to the point where someone, has considered ending their life. But I guess I'm wondering, is there a worry about, I don't know, normalizing or validating the fact that the student that this is something they've considered? I guess, I don't know, sort of, that's my worry.
Yeah, that is a great question, Andrea. And there are so many people that worry about that. They say, if I bring up suicide, am I putting that idea in their head? Like, am I then responsible for making that feel like it's a valid choice? And so studies show that we don't put it in their heads if they're not thinking about suicide, and we ask them about it, they just say, nope. And we say, good, and we can move on with our conversation. But if a student is thinking about that and has not been able to tell anybody, or feels, the stigma of saying that out loud, for us to bring it up directly is such a relief to them. They say, oh my gosh, finally somebody who can acknowledge that this is something that people think about and that I can share. Yes, I have, and it's scaring me, it's really, really helpful. So yeah, it's a great question. And what we have heard in the field from studies is that that's not something we need to worry about. Yeah, thank you for asking. Any other questions about this direct language?
I have a question. So I have had a student who did state that he had contemplated taking his life, but that he didn't have an active plan in place. And I was just wondering if you could go over what our response should be if somebody, has an active plan in place versus has contemplated it in the past, just so we know what next steps we need to take.
That is a great question. So I'll give you some information about the kinds of assessments we do on our side. I want to make sure that you never feel like you need to do a full assessment on your side if that's not your training, but you're exactly right. The things that we're looking for are kind of, do they have a concrete plan? Means that the risk is much higher. And then especially if they have the means to carry out that plan, like, yes, I have the pills, I have the gun, those sorts of things make us much more concerned. If it's more vague, like, oh, I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up, that's something that is concerning, that they're feeling that way, but we don't feel as immediate about the risk that it is to them. So if these are thoughts that they've had in the past, but they're not having now, that is also less concerning to us. So the difference would be if it's something that you don't feel like is an immediate risk, I would talk to them about the counseling center and just make sure that they know we're available, and we'll be talking about that later in the workshop. If it is something that you feel like there's immediate danger, like the student saying, yes, I have a plan, yes, I have the means, and yes, I'm going to leave here and do it tonight, that's a situation where we need to act immediately. And so that would be a call to UPD if we're on campus, or letting the counseling center know, and we can follow up with a student. So I'll give information about the care team after this, but those would be situations where you want to act and keep them safe immediately. But that is very rare that a student is at that point and discloses that to somebody on campus outside of the counseling center. So just to put it in the context of very, very rarely does that happen. And we're here to support if that situation happens. That makes sense? Or any other questions folks have about that? It's a great question.
I am curious about high functioning students who may come in stating that they need, some crisis resources, but just appear to be fine. And, because of stigma and stuff, like maybe they need to get like alone with a counselor before they can even open up to anyone on that level. So how do you handle situations like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, again, taking them at their word, if they're saying that they're distressed or in crisis, we want to give them crisis resources. And so we let them know. We don't screen and say, no, you're not in enough crisis to see a counselor. And so just to say, yes, these resources are available. Counselors have crisis hours every day. You can get a same-day appointment, even remotely. That is all really helpful. Yeah. So yeah, I think not judging and knowing, just like Esther's saying, that people have different levels of what are they comfortable disclosing and where, and letting students decide that, not deciding that on their behalf. Does that answer your question, Esther? Great, thank you. And then Yvette, it looked like you had another question.
Yeah, so just clarity on your response to Ms. Andrea. So now that we're working remotely, if a student does let you know, well, I do have a plan, I'm contemplating this. So are you saying that we contact like Sharon or somebody at the campus if the student isn't living on campus, if say for instance they're home, do we contact the school and then let them contact the student, or do we call 911? I mean,
yeah, great question. So I would say, again, this is something that depends on you and your comfort level. If it were me who's pretty comfortable in these situations because of the work I do, I would talk with the student directly and let them know I'm really concerned about them. And then depending on the situation, I might call 911 myself. I'll put in the chat, I just need to look it up. We have a crisis resources page on our website that has information about hotlines for students to call directly, but it also has a lot of alternatives to 911 because there are a lot of folks who are concerned about police responding to mental health emergencies, right? And so there are a lot of communities in California that are creating alternative systems where it's a social worker or an EMT and a counselor who are responding to these emergencies. And so that has information about some of those in different areas. Again, I don't want to put it on you all to do all that research and find that and follow through. And we as a campus would also want to know about the situation. So if you just want to call the counseling center and get a message to me immediately, if you want to put in a care report and then follow up and make sure somebody has read it immediately, that's also action that you could take. Okay, great question. And it is trickier being remote. Our students are all over the place. And so to follow up and respond to these situations feels tricky. We do have protocol in place and we've done it a few times and it's been effective. It hasn't come up as much as you would think it might. So we've been able to handle it so far. Okay, great question. I'm going to move through a couple more slides and then I want to get us to talking about our resources so you can hear the great information that we have on that as well. So these are things that we've kind of talked about already, but our last two things in terms of interacting with a student in distress are to connect with them. So again, just having these conversations, breaking their sense of isolation and that they feel alone is often the best support that we can provide. So that just making a student feel like there's somebody who cares about them and there are other resources that are available breaks down some of that sense of isolation and hopelessness that they might feel. And then you want to keep in mind other resources that might be helpful to them And often the student knows what those resources are in their own lives already, right? So who are the people that they talk to? Who are the family members or classmates or other folks on campus that are their support system? Are there other organizations they're involved in, like a support center or counseling or a church community? You know, are there other systems that are kind of supporting them already? If the student can think through, yes, there are all these people I can reach out to, that makes them feel, again, much more supported in the world. And then also letting them know how they can connect with these 3 resources that we're going to present today. Let them just feel like, yeah, there is a whole community that is supporting me. And so we'll talk about the care team and how to put in a report to the care team, which means that somebody from the care team is going to be reaching out to the student. But another thing I always want to highlight with our staff and faculty is that, again, because our campus is so relational, that for a lot of students, you know, they get the information from you directly. If I call them, they're like, I don't know who that phone number is. I don't know who that lady is. I'm not going to return her call. But I know Yvette, right? I know Esther. Okay, Esther's telling me to make this connection. I'm much more likely to do it. So both putting in a care team report so that we can follow up with them, but also giving the students the information directly really, really helps and increases the chances that they're going to follow through and connect with those resources. And then the last thing on this slide is just to take care of yourself. So just like Sharon was saying, that these interactions take a toll on us, right? Because we care about our students, because we worry about them. And so during the interaction, we stay as focused as possible on the students themselves. But afterwards, we just need to check in with ourselves and say, whew, how was that for me, right? What do I need? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to take a little walk outside? Do I need to call somebody else from my office and just say, you won't believe the conversation I just had? So tune in with yourself and see what you need in that moment. And then go ahead and make sure that you're taking care of yourself in whatever way you need to, and not just expecting yourself to jump to the next student, the next meeting, the next task that you have, because this takes a toll on us. And that is why we also offer a workshop on avoiding burnout and compassion fatigue, which is another one I'll just highlight that I would love for folks to participate in, because that is space to think about the toll that these interactions have on us personally. So our last slide in this section is about the care team, which I keep mentioning. So this is a team on our campus that includes our associate vice presidents of student affairs, our associate deans of all the colleges, our case manager, Alilta Tuwelde, our counseling center, and a lot of other support services on campus, to come together as a team and talk about what are the different points of contact that we're having with students that we're concerned about, and how can we work together as a team to support them. And this is kind of a best practice of campuses that have had unfortunate incidents and realized, all these different departments had a little slice of information about what was going on for that student, but there was no place to put it all together and see the big picture. So that's what the care team is intending to do. So reports are entered online, and you can see the link up on the screen. And then they're received and then assigned to the appropriate areas for those areas to reach out. And then the report is investigated, we plan our response, students are contacted and offered resources. And then the whole team meets every 2 weeks to discuss all the new cases that have come in, and then any other cases that need follow-up. So having been on the care team for the last couple of years, I can say that the majority of the reports that we're getting these days are about basic needs and about mental health. And so that is a lot of what we're seeing, and we are so glad to know about that. So our areas can reach out and connect with those students and make sure that they know that our services are available. But again, if you can just be sharing, about our programs and making sure that students are aware of us and communicate with us on their own, that is really helpful as well. And then the details of the report and the follow-up are confidential to the student, but staff and faculty can always reach out to the care team with additional information. So Alilta is a great starting place. If you just say, oh, this thing happened with the student that I already reported, I want to let you know, or even to just check in and say, is there anything else that I can help with? Feel free to do that, because I know sometimes it's a lot to have something on you and then put this report in and then not know what's happening afterwards. So feel free to follow up with us. We can't always tell you much about what's going on, but just staying in touch often feels good on both sides. So any questions about our care team and that process?
Yes, I have a question. If we are reporting a student of concern and you're letting them know, how do we give them, can we give them a name saying this person is going to contact you? So they're not just like, oh my God, they're reporting me. Now I've got this person looking for me and I don't know who they are. I don't know what to say. So can we attach a name to it?
That is a great question. I would probably attach a department to it rather than a name. I know in counseling, like any of the counselors could be the person that reaches out to a student. And so I wouldn't want them to expect, like, if it's not Shauna, I'm not going to answer. And I think the same is probably true for Doris. I know you personally reach out to a lot of students, but you've got other people reaching out as well. So I would probably say, Wendy, like someone from the care team is going to reach out to you, and they will say, I'm from the care team. And they might be, if you have a sense of like, it's a basic need, so it's probably going to be Pioneers for Hope is going to reach out to you, or it's a counseling issue, so probably it's going to be a counselor that's going to reach out to you. You can give them that information, but you probably won't know the exact way that the care team is going to assign the case. And so I wouldn't be too specific, just in case the student gets confused and misses some of what the care team is going to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions about care before we move forward? Yes.
I guess I just have a question regarding, if we wanted to provide anticipatory guidance, I think this builds on Wendy's question a little bit. What exactly could we tell the patient aside? Somebody from this team is going to be contacting you. Can we provide any additional information about what sort of resources or support or next steps or what information they want to have ready?
Yeah, so I would do all of that. I would say, it sounds like it would be really helpful for you to connect with Pioneers for Hope. Here's their website, here's their Instagram, here's the phone number to call if you have any questions. I would give them that information up front. And then I would also say, just to make sure that, our care team's aware, I'm going to put in a care report and somebody might follow up with you. But I would really focus on what can the student do proactively and not just have them necessarily wait for the care reach out. I would say, give them the information so they can get that process started if they want to, and then care team will be just kind of a follow-up to make sure they remember to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
And usually our reach outs are just, I want to make sure you have this information. I want to ask if you need any more support, so you can let them know that that's what they can expect as well. Okay, great question. Yeah,
we have a question in the chat as well.
Okay, I see Andrea's question. Can I ask in general what the cases coming in before the pandemic were like, or was it pretty similar, basic needs and mental health? I would say it was pretty similar. Yeah, Doris? I mean, definitely basic needs requests have gone up. Just being the one who used to review all the reports, I would say most of them are mental health related. It's just my perspective. But yeah, I think definitely we've had more basic needs since the pandemic, but I think our two areas probably got the majority of the reports even before the pandemic.
I have another question.
Yeah.
When you do a report to the care team, is there always a contact back to the student, or is it based on, priority? I mean, is the student always contacted back? Because if I'm saying I'm making a report, I want them to understand, what, the next steps.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can only think of one report that we haven't acted on, and that's when a student put in a care team report to say that the air conditioning in the shuttle was broken, and we didn't respond to that one. But every other report that I can think of, I think someone has at least reached out to the student. So I think you can tell them to expect that we're going to reach out. But again, I would always give them any information that you feel like would be helpful as well. So to say, you can expect that somebody will be reaching out to you, but here's the information ahead of time, just so again, they're not waiting for that and expecting that. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I know that Doris has some amazing information for us, so I'm going to turn it over to her so she can talk a little bit about Pioneers for Hope.
And I will keep it, fairly brief. We have our website information, but I wanted to just share about Pioneers for Hope and what it stands for and what we do and how we connect to students and how we've pivoted, virtually to really really trying to make sure that we're supporting our students who are now all over the country. And so Pioneers for Hope actually stands for helping our pioneers excel. It's called Project Hope. It's called Pioneers for Hope. It's called multiple different things. The pantry, the Hope Pantry. We prefer Pioneers for Hope. We're coming away from the Project Hope only because project indicates there's an end. And we don't know that there will be an end, and we want to continue to support students. So Pioneers for Hope actually started in 2016 as a response to studies that were saying that we had a significant amount of students system-wide that were dealing with food and housing insecurity. So at East Bay, pre-pandemic, it was about 1 in 5 that were dealing with food insecurity and 1 in 10 that were dealing with housing insecurity. Nationally, it's about 46%. And we feel that in the Bay Area, it's likely a little bit higher. And that's important because it does show how students will show up in the spaces that you are both supporting them and meeting with them. We used trauma-informed practices in our Pioneers for Hope Pantry, which basically means there are quite a few students that may have had experiences visiting a food pantry or going to get food that may or may not have been a pleasant experience for them. So we're very conscious about the service that we provide and how we provide it. But Pioneers for Hope provides myriad of services. One is our food pantries, and we'll talk about that because they are approved as of yesterday to be operational again in person at both Hayward and Concord. So we will be hosting appointments for students to get food starting next week again. We also have emergency assistance. Emergency assistance is actually emergency cash assistance, assistance for transportation, assistance for groceries, for students that may not be on campus or may not have access to campus to get food. We have access to supporting students in finding emergency housing. Emergency housing is harder to find for our students, especially now. But we do have 8 beds on campus that students who are would need single occupancy would have access to, meaning they're not suitable or set up for family housing, but we do have housing available for students. We can provide meal swipes for students who need hot meals and have access to campus. And we have multiple different ways for students to connect with us. Since we started the pandemic, we have virtual drop-in hours that we are hosting pretty much daily, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And we go into the evening realizing that students have a myriad of different things that they're balancing now. Many are parents or working with other people in the household. So being able to drop in is sometimes a little bit hard. So we go into the evening and we're updating those on our website. We have a Food Finder US site, and students can actually pop in. This is for information for you to know, but they can actually pop in and we'll help them find resources. And you can always come to our website and find information for the student. And we really try to make it very matter of fact, like Shauna mentioned, that food is everyone's right. And so we just want to make sure that you're sharing this and that we share it in a way, put it in syllabus, mention it often. Everybody needs food. And I also want to mention that our Pioneers for Hope pantries are open to faculty and staff. We realize in the pandemic that many people have been impacted. And so there's not a lot of questions that are asked. It's open to faculty and staff. We don't do an assessment of why you may or may not need food. We do ask a few questions, but that's mostly for our reporting, and all you need is a net ID. And one thing that we have is a partnership with our sister CSUs, so that if a student that is going to Sac State or going to Northridge lives in the Bay Area and is back at home, they can access our food pantries. So we want to make sure that people realize that, are aware of it, and that we have contact information on this slide. Are there any questions about that initially? Okay, great. I do want to mention that we also have our basic needs resource guide available front and center on our website. There's a technical glitch with it this morning that should be updated by today, but any student, anyone can go right to the website. And so we can share this and give you a syllabus statement to share in your syllabus. And we're working with the Academic Senate to actually make a basic needs statement mandatory in all East-based syllabi. So if you need resources or students need resources or just want to check them out, and it's a myriad of resources for students who are here in person, for undocumented students, for undocumented parents, how to access EDD, even some quick recipes and fun things to do with your kids. So this myriad of resources and information available right front and center on our website to connect with students. We realize that many of our students in this situation may be even more isolated or traumatized. So we do a lot to increase engagement through our social media. And that is something that we really want to make sure that students are aware of. Students can actually DM us and ask questions through our DM, and we're getting a lot of students connecting with us in that form. And just want to make sure that people are aware of that and continually mention it. I always say, take a look around, come and visit us virtually so that you can have the experience to share with someone else. And we say that to everyone. Come visit us, come take a tour in person, just stop by, see what it's like. Then you can tell a friend. One thing is that when students are experiencing basic needs, I know that there was a question about high functioning students. Many of students that are experiencing basic needs will never tell you. They may tell me, they may show up at the pantry, but they're not going to express that. So you sharing the information is extremely important because they're not going to tell you, and they don't necessarily show up as needing food or housing. We've seen through the pandemic in our emergency assistance that quite a few of our students have technology needs and that they're not able to necessarily have access easily to a computer or Wi-Fi, and students can actually apply for emergency assistance to get access to help pay that bill or increase their Wi-Fi. And next, I want to talk a little bit about our CalFresh program. So CalFresh is a program that we call, it's food aid, just like financial aid, that supports anyone who qualifies with monthly food dollars to shop locally or even online at Amazon Fresh and Walmart groceries. I would encourage you to follow us on Pioneers for Hope or on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram with all types of information about CalFresh. And beginning February 22nd, which is Monday, every eligible student in California public colleges will be notified or receive a letter regarding their eligibility for CalFresh. There was a policy law that changed starting January 1st that if you have an EFC, expected family contribution of 0, or you are eligible for work study, even if you're not working, that gives you qualification to access CalFresh dollars. And CalFresh dollars for a single student right now during the pandemic are $234 per student as a single student. That goes up if you need to apply with your family, and that is available for multiple students, even if they're living with their family. So a family of 6 may get $1,000 a month. And these are monies that do not need to be paid back. We call it food aid, grant aid for food. Unfortunately, if you're undocumented, you may not qualify, but people in your household may qualify. So we can connect with students to connect on how they can access CalFresh. And we have assessed through our financial aid department, those letters are going to go out to about 10,000 of East-based students that either have a 0 EFC or are eligible for work study. We used to estimate that about 80% of our Cal State East-based students are actually eligible for CalFresh. So what you can do after this meeting is just tell people about it. And on the next slide, we have some fun ways for you to share about CalFresh. And Shauna, can you click that video really quickly? It's less than a minute long. And this will be going out to everyone. It's just a little clip on what is CalFresh. So that's just a little video about CalFresh, and CalFresh Week will be coming up all next week. And we have a myriad of activities happening just to share information. And we're giving away all types of fun prizes. So there's a CalFresh Ally presentation. There is a mental health moves with CalFresh on how to use your CalFresh dollars to buy food, to do self-care and take care of your skin. There's Wellness Wednesday. There's all types of CalFresh pop-in information. We just want to spread this information so that students know, or anyone, actually, we can help anyone in the state of California, faculty, staff know that CalFresh is a resource that's available to you and to our students. And that is all that I have, I believe. Are there any questions?
Teresa, I have a question. It said that students are eligible for $234. I just want to clarify, that's $234 a month. Is that correct? Or
And
little one?
Yeah, it's up to $234 a month. That's normally $204, but they've increased it through September because of pandemic-related resources that are needed. So yes, it's up to $234 a month, and I cannot tell you what that means. And if you look at our Instagram and our Facebook pages, we have videos of students shopping with CalFresh, and there's lots of other benefits that go along with it. We have one student who hasn't paid a cell phone bill in 5 years because they qualify for free cell phone service because they're eligible for CalFresh.
Amazing. I think every time I hear Doris present, it's always new information, by the way. Pioneers for Hope is always just changing and adding so many amazing resources. And then, yeah, we're all just kind of amazed at like, wow, there's a lot going on. So it's really inspiring. Any other questions for Doris? Fantastic. So I'm going to move us forward. We have scenarios that we wanted to give us time to discuss. I think instead of putting us in breakout rooms now, we're going to wait until we go through all of the resources, and then we'll do one last breakout room to end. But just you can take a glance at the scenario, and I'm going to share a document in the chat as well that has all three of our scenarios, so you can start thinking about how you're going to discuss this thing. But before we do that, let's move on to our confidential advocate. So take it away, Sharon.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Sharon Ford. I am the confidential advocate for Cal State East Bay. I am really excited to be in this role and to just be a part of the Cal State East Bay community. So just quickly a little bit about me since I'm new on campus. I have been working with survivors, oh goodness, at least 18 years. And I have worked with survivors in the community. I've also worked with survivors in incarcerated settings mostly. I've have many years of experience working inside of county jails and state prisons. And along with that experience of working with survivors, I also have an extensive work history with folks who have caused harm. So, and I like to mention that because I think it's important as, you know, someone who also works with survivors. Now, my work may not go hand in hand with the survivor and the responsible party, but I also have the ability to meet someone who is curious about have they harmed someone, is this harm? So I like to just share that as well. So as a confidential advocate, I provide confidential support services to students, faculty, and staff. Anyone on campus who may find themselves in situations that pertain to sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, or relational violence. And so if there's someone who may disclose to you that, you know, there's a relationship that I'm in and, you know, there's some harm happening. Again, stating who you are, you know, as a staff person, I am a mandated reporter. However, you know, I would love to get you to have this conversation with Sharon, right? I would love to have you contact her and you guys talk a little bit about what's going on with you. And I think, you know, allowing someone earlier when we was like, well, I don't want them to just shut down and stop talking. That can happen. Sometimes people will shut down, but I think if you come right behind with, I'm a mandated reporter with, but I would love to connect you with this other person. Sometimes that keeps the person engaged in the conversation, or at least present, to where then all of a sudden they don't feel like, oh my God, I can't talk to this person, or now I'm out here alone. So that's something that we want you to know, that you can always say, hey, there's a confidential advocate on campus. I am separate from Title IX and the academic admin, in the sense that I am not a mandated reporter. If someone discloses to me that there's some things happening to them, that's not something that I am particularly going to go and report to Title IX. I do get referrals from Title IX, but again, my job is to meet with that person, create a space for them they can share what they feel comfortable sharing, and then we move from there. If you choose to file Title IX, I'm going to walk you through that process. I'm going to be there with you through the duration of that process. If you choose not to go to Title IX, is there, campus police that you need to contact? I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to be side by side with you. I'm going to support you through those things. If you choose, I don't want to report at all. Okay, let's talk about how I can best support you. What's happening? Are you safe? If you're not immediately safe, if you're in crisis, let's talk about crisis. If you are in a, say, dating violence or domestic violence situation, and that, I need to get out of this. What I want to do is have a conversation with you to create a plan. And I think that that's really important for folks to understand, who have maybe never worked with survivors, that the idea of, okay, we just want to get you to, get you to safety. Because Shauna said, these are your students. These are people you see. You want to see them not hurt. And it's really important that it may not be safe for that person in that moment to just leave. And so what I'm going to be here doing is I'm going to work with that person and create a safety plan. What does that look like? How does that look? How much time does that take? What do you have in place? What are some strategic planning that we can do? What have you tried? Has that worked? Like all these things, that's what we're going to be talking about. That's what we're going to be sifting through and working on together, me and that person. And so, again, the person who's coming to me, the student, the faculty, or the staff, one, it's really important for students to know that this is not something that's going to be reported to their parents. If they don't want their parents to know, then I'm not here to report it. The school's not here to report it. This is confidential. So this gives them an opportunity to go to a safe space where they actually can talk. A little more about the background, just giving an idea of like, what is it like to talk to a confidential advocate? I'm a survivor myself. I feel very comfortable saying that. So I am a survivor myself. And so as a survivor, what's important to me is I want to create a safe space for people to come in and be who they are. Exactly there's no expectations. If you're angry, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting someone else, I want you to show up the way authentically you feel in that moment. If you are confused about what's happening, that's okay. I want you to show up authentically who you are in that moment. Because I think when we, for me, when I give people a place to be authentically themselves, I think that sort of helps the wall come down a little bit. They begin to feel like they can begin to unpack what's happening to them. And then they begin to share on their terms. It's not me, speaking for them or giving them a bunch of information. It's saying, what is it that you need, right? And there is no expectation for follow-up, right? What do you need? Here are the resources. There's no expectation for the follow-up, right? So that's what I mean by creating a safe space. I also have an extensive background as a restorative justice practitioner. And so my focus with working with survivors is, are you safe? What's the next referral that you need, whether it's crisis intervention or it's counseling or whatever. And then what do we need to do to bring you to healing, right? What does that look like for you? And then that may be me initiating a conversation, and then I go ahead and pass that off to the counseling service and say, you know what, that sounds like a really good plan. It sounds like you're on track. I would love to, if you're okay with it, either encourage you to go talk to Shauna, or, if you would like for me to do the referral for you, absolutely, they won't know what I'm referring and what the conversation that we've had, because that's all confidential. But I would love to have you go and talk to a counselor, for a crisis intervention, or just an appointment to start setting up some appointments for yourself so that you can begin to work on this path of healing for yourself. So that's a little bit about like the approach, what I do, and how I'm here to help. Again, it could be faculty, it could be staff, and it could be students. Anyone who finds themselves in a harmful situation, please reach out. If you are talking to someone, let them know, hey, do you mind if I contact Sharon and just say, I want to do a referral, and that's the process.
I just put up all the contact information for Sharon. Any questions for her about any of the information she presented? Wonderful. I really appreciate, especially Sharon, that you talked about what it's like to talk with you, because I think often when we're sending students to somebody else, we want to set them up well, and that's a lot of what our conversation has been. So that feels really helpful. Okay, fantastic. I know we are getting close to the end of our time, so I'm going to move us forward to talk a little bit about counseling. So counseling services on campus through Student Health and Counseling is for any personal concern. So obviously we're different from academic counseling, but we can talk with students about anything else. We can't tell them what classes to register for, but anything else that is on their minds. Stress, anxiety, depression, relationships are all key things that come up a lot, but we hear everything under the sun. We always tell students that our services are free, with kind of air quotes, because they're free because students pay a health and wellness fee with every semester that they register with us. And so it's covered by that fee, but they don't need to pay anything additional if they access our services. And they pay that fee whether or not they come to us. So we encourage students to get their money's worth and use our services. We offer individual counseling. We offer groups through Zoom every day. And we also have crisis sessions every day in the afternoon. So if students want a same-day appointment, they can call our front desk or they can email us and we can set them up with that. At this time, we're doing just remote sessions, so over Zoom or by phone. And we always assure our students that all of our counselors are professional. They have all graduated with their master's degrees, and many of them are licensed. It's all confidential, and so our records are not part of their university records in any way. We don't disclose who accesses our services without their consent. And it's all voluntary. So even if you as a staff or faculty really strongly encourages a student to come to us, tell them you really strongly encourage them to come to us, and then it's still up to them whether or not they engage. So in terms of accessing counseling, students can schedule appointments online through our online portal, or they can call our main number, and our main number is forwarded to our front desk staff during this time where we're remote. And so they will always answer the phone, or they can email this email address. And if they can't find an appointment online, we do have crisis appointments available every day. We also have an after hours phone service, and it's called Protocol. And so if students dial our main number and then option 2, they can speak with a phone counselor immediately, either after hours or on the weekends, and get some support. And then the Protocol actually sends me an email after every call, and so we can follow up with a student if needed. And then we have a lot of online resources on our website. So I'm going to put some links into the chat. But we just want to make sure that students know that these are all available. We know that not every student wants an appointment, but a lot of students do want information about mental health resources. So we have things like our self-help videos that counselors have recorded during this time to say, let's do a breathing exercise, or let's talk about a particular topic that's really affecting a lot of people. We have online wellness resources, and so a lot of different podcasts, apps, websites that are useful for students and the issues they might be facing. We have a long list of things students can do to take care of themselves, even while physically distancing. We have a website on social justice and wellness for our students who are involved in activism, but also want to balance that out and think about how that's impacting their mental health. We have recorded a lot of the common presentations that we do around the campus. So just in case we're not available to come out and do that over Zoom or live, students can watch those videos on our website. And then we have a lot of wellness ambassador trainings just like this one to support staff and faculty as you're supporting students. So let me see, I think that's it. So this is our last scenario. Let me pause there. Any questions about counseling services?
Sean, I did want to say too, because it came up around mentioning a department. And so I would say for me, although yes, I am the only confidential advocate, I would also say a confidential advocate, because say, for example, I'm on vacation or something like that, Shauna would be the person that I would make sure is going to be reaching out to that person. So that would be the only other person outside of myself who would reach out to a student based on the confidential advocate role. It would be Shauna. So I just wanted to also make sure that folks were aware that if I was out, if there was an email response maybe in the week that you sent me and it said I was on vacation, just know that Shauna would be the person that would respond to that student.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions about counseling or any of the resources? I know it's a lot of information. I will be sending out these slides and all these links to you, so you'll have them. But any other questions you want to ask while we're all here together?
Actually, yes, I had a question. So if a student were to have some sort of traumatic event, or and they wanted to notify their professors because maybe they couldn't attend class or something like that, if they worked with Sharon or with Student Health and Counseling Services, would they notify the instructors about that? Or
Great question. Yes, so Sharon would do that on their behalf as part of her advocate role to let professors know and just kind of make that process easier for students. Student Health and Counseling, our counselors would not do that because we want to make sure that it's confidential, that we're working with the student. So we would probably work with another counselor, like their accessibilities counselor, or with the care team. That could be if you submit a report to the care team, then either Alilta or our associate deans would work with the student to make sure that that communication was happening. Yeah, great question.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions folks have? Fantastic. Well, we didn't get to our scenarios. It's funny, we keep making this presentation longer in terms of time, and then we just keep filling it up. And so someday we'll get to our scenarios. Maybe it'll be a 4-hour training and we'll actually talk about scenarios. But you have the document, and they'll be in the slides if you just want to think about it. If you have any questions about how would I answer this scenario, you can reach out to us. And yeah, just to say that we are all available. And so you have met me, you've met Doris, you've met Sharon. Reach out to us by email if you have any questions. And if you're thinking about putting in a care report that's just specific to basic needs or specific to confidential advocate, you can also just email those people directly. You don't necessarily have to put in a care report that's going to be seen by the whole team if it just is about one area. But if you're not sure what kinds of support would the student need, then you can put in a care report just so we can help make that decision and let everybody know. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. It's been wonderful to spend time with you, and we hope to be in touch with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.